Welcome into another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Mr. Hatch. It's May.
It is May.
It's the thick of May.
Yes, we're in the middle of May.
Yes.
The 2 weeks plus or the month of May, however you want to debate it. But we're here. There's on-track activity after a bit of a delay as we record this on Thursday morning ahead of practice. So practice washed out on Tuesday, full day yesterday, full day expected today. Friday looks a little iffy. The weekend looks great for Indy 500 qualifying. We'll get to that a bit later on, but first off, we have a race to recap. The GMR Grand Prix at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. Alex Palou, absolutely dominant in this race over the weekend, and getting the tire strategy right was the key thing, and that he did. And for Palou, going from reds on the start to double blacks to close out, that was the way to do it. It worked. And for Christian Lundgaard, slipping at the end, just a disappointing day after a pole. We thought he'd be strong here, right? He finished in fourth, but he had the pole, and he battled for the first half. It was back and forth between him and Palou, and then just kind of slipped that final stint.
He did, and Palou got it right. Ganassi got it right. That's just what the top teams do in this series, folks, is the top teams get it right more often than not than the lower tier teams, and that's just what happened here. Palou was kind of an afterthought going into the race, even though he had qualified third because of all the attention on Lundgaard and all that, but just a perfect race for Palou. Pulled away from everybody in the last stint of that race. Dominated, winning by close to 17 seconds. Great performance by Palou on a day that really had some storylines, and we'll get into them with our three things. Do you want to start with your first?
Yeah, I just want to start with Alex Palou. You mentioned afterthought going into the race, which is, I mean, makes us feel kind of dumb for saying that, but
I mean, we're dumb.
We're talking about Christian Lundgaard. We're talking about
Romain Grosjean.
Yeah, Grosjean. I mean, our pick was Grosjean going into the weekend, and I mean, they simply did not.
We were way off.
They did not have it at all. But for Palou, this is a guy whose last two wins have been incredibly dominant. Like you said, won by nearly 17 seconds. And the thing is, this wasn't even, that dominant of a race compared to other races in this new era of IndyCar. DW12, MarshallProRacer.com, kind of comparing. In Palou's victory at Laguna Seca, over 30 seconds, that was, the most dominant race as far as in this new era since 2012. Now, the Indy GP win, number 5. Rossi with 2 and 3 from Road America 2019, and then before that, Long Beach of 2019 as well. And then Scott Dixon at number 4 with the 2020 Indy GP win. So noticing a trend here, the Indy GP multiple times on this list as far as dominant wins. I remember that 2020 win by Dixon. I mean, Graham Rahal, I think, was second that day, if I'm not mistaken. I think so. But he didn't get the cautions and anything to work to even touch Scott Dixon that day. But for Alex Palou, it was dominant. And I guess the biggest thing we've seen since the awkwardness last year at Laguna Seca and the win, all that stuff's behind Jim Ganassi racing Alex Palou. Now, is he still going to be on the move to Arrow McLaren next year? Most likely. We've seen nothing to tell us otherwise. But they've been able to put that awkwardness over the contract dispute aside, and he seems to have found his groove again. Really, you could tell. Now, he wasn't outwardly letting it affect him as far as what he was saying all the right things, because you got to be very careful in those situations late last year.
Right. But
the win at Laguna Seca kind of eased the tension, and this, it just felt like he was part of the team once again.
It did, and if for somehow Alex Palou can win the 500 and Ganassi's off to a great start we've seen this week, he would be a championship driver. He would be a 500 winning driver on the move to McLaren. And this will be a fascinating move to reevaluate in a couple years on if it was the best move for Alex Palou and if it was the best move for Chip Ganassi, because this is a driver with the pedigree to win a 500, win a championship, win multiple races a season, and he's proven that. Not a 500 yet, but could change as soon as next Sunday. And can Chip Ganassi replace that? We've talked so much about finding the next Scott Dixon, and you felt Alex Palou was that. And then we talk about, could Marcus Ericsson be that? And there's overtures of maybe he's on the move at some point. Then again, when you look at Alex Palou, you're having all this success with a particular team, going to another team, albeit on the rise and considered a power team in the series. Is that going to be all it's worth and all it's cracked up to be? And I think that's a great question as well.
I'm sure it will be monetarily. Like, people are asking the question, why leave Ganassi
when
the thing. You're competitive at Indy every year? And to be fair, the same can be said of Aaron McLaren, since that team became
they also
really
have a history of missing races.
True.
Missing 500s.
But I would say in the current iteration of the
True.
team, as a full-time competitor since 2020, since they came in and came into the sport with Pato O'Ward and Oliver Askew, they've been competitive at Indy. Yeah, they haven't won. They've come close. They've been able to win races. Now, only Pato O'Ward's been able to win races.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the funding's there, right?
Yes.
Their 3 cars are full. That's why they're potentially adding a 4th for next year full-time. But beyond the money and the opportunity in F1, I think that's another key part of this, as far as maybe not necessarily getting an F1 ride, but he already got an F1 test.
Mm-hmm.
Chip Ganassi can offer that. And just the connections with that. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, right? And this is one that is a fascinating case study that we'll likely see play out the rest of this season and then into next season and compare year over year.
They're all it's all roses right now with Alex Palou and Chip Ganassi Racing, but I can guarantee you next year Chip Ganassi Racing is going to want to beat Alex Palou at every opportunity, at every race.
Yes, and Alex Palou, with having Chip Ganassi equipment, has had a lot of success. Will that success stay the same? A lot can be said, and we'll probably get to this more later, but anytime you change a team, there is an adjustment period.
Yeah.
Whether it was Simon Pagenaud at Penske back in 2015, and then his second year won the title and got off to a great start, winning the first 3 races that season. Jack Harvey, terrible year last year. First year at Rahal after moving over from Meyer
Hasn't
Shank.
been much better this year, to be honest.
It has been a struggle, but we finally saw something out of that team last weekend. It's not as easy to just go, and even Alexander Rossi.
I was going to say, Alexander Rossi so far this year.
Yeah, we finally are starting to see those results come.
I mean, even Scott McLaughlin when he came into the series. I know that was not team to team, but he needed that year.
It takes a bit of time, but for Alex Palou, this is a dominant performance and one we haven't seen, since Laguna Seca last year. And I think the biggest thing to me is just everything that happened off track. Yes, is it still lurking in the background? Absolutely. But everyone said the right things. There didn't seem to be any amount of awkwardness, and people moved on. That was my first takeaway.
Yeah, my first. And you look at the results of this race, and it's very much a haves and have-nots breakdown when you look at the final results. Starting with the 16 drivers that finished on the lead lap, with Scott McLaughlin being that 16th place driver. After that, you have Devlin DeFrancesco in 17th. I know he's with the power team in Andretti, but hasn't showed much of anything while he's there. And you go down the list, and it's the lesser teams. It's the Juncos down there. It's the Foyts down there. It's the Coins down there. It was very much a top-heavy final box score in terms of the power teams as opposed
Meyer
to
Shank even down there.
Yeah, Meyer Shank, they've been down there. I would say they're not even close to a power team anymore at this point. So it was very much a haves and have-nots day, really, when you look at the standings. So that was kind of my take, is we have the haves and have-nots in the series. We're one of the two that will say that, as opposed to saying how there's competitive balance and blah, blah, blah. But it definitely showed on Saturday with the have teams and the have-nots.
When you have, let's see, 4 at Andretti, 3 at Penske, 3 at McLaren, and then at Ganassi, you have, 4 as well?
4.
So 14 out of 27. So, yes, it is half the field, But that half the field, quite often, you're talking about 12 drivers in the top 12.
Right.
So that wasn't quite the case on
you
Saturday.
Had Ray Hall
but it was
crashing the party a little bit. It was good to see for them, but by and large, it was the power teams up there. There was no good stories in terms of a lesser team making a move on Saturday.
And speaking of making moves, my second takeaway, Arrow McLaren, a team that, yes, they've qualified well on this track, but have not necessarily raced well on this track over the years. Felix Rosenqvist, I think, had the pole, last year for this? So close to the pole, but for them to go 2, 3, and 5 with Pato O'Ward and then Alexander Rossi and Felix Rosenqvist, this is a very impressive bounce back for them, especially Rossi, who this is the first race, it felt like to me, all season where he's looked kind of every bit the old Rossi, so to speak, and comfortable with his new team. It was going to take some time, as we mentioned, but to go from 10th to 3rd, and he really had a great start to that race early on. Now I think we're starting to see him move up and be more comfortable and confident, and I'm sure that will showcase itself on the oval.
And we've heard that this week in interviews as Rossi's starting to really settle in and feel like a part of the team and a real competitor week in and week out. And that's going to be indicative, too, of McLaren's chances as a whole, because we're still saying, when is McLaren going to break out outside of Pato O'Ward? When are they going to start? When are they going to win a 500? When are they going to win a championship? And those things, if you have a driver on the team that's not capable of doing those things, it's pulling everybody down. But with Rossi being able to get round back into form, got that late win last year, right? That really kind of got the monkey off his back. Now he has a chance to really start fresh. We've seen that. We've seen some top finishes go away for various reasons early in the season, but this is the time I think that he can really be a competitor next week in the 500 and beyond as we get into really the second of the three halves of the season, three portions of the season. You look at pre-500, post-500, and then down the stretch, kind of like 5-6 races each, is we can see if Rossi can make a move in that second 6 races.
Well, and the Arrow McLaren team has been good at Detroit. They've had fast cars there. We know Rossi's good at Road America. So it's just
Mid-Ohio in there.
Will these things translate over? That will be a fascinating storyline to watch, starting with qualifying, what kind of speed they have this weekend. All right, what's your second takeaway?
Well, we'll talk about Rahal Letterman landing it because people were so high on them just because they've been so terrible that they actually showed some semblance of competency and everybody got excited. Still weren't good enough to get a win. Still couldn't even get on the podium. But do we feel like this could be the turnaround that this team needs? Or is it, look, this team is traditionally pretty strong at the road course. And once again, they were decently strong this year, but this doesn't have much in the way of staying power. I don't think we know the answer yet. Despite not getting a podium, I think the fact that 2 of their drivers finished in the top 10 was pretty darn impressive considering what they have been. But is this a one and done for RLL? Are they back to the back? Even if they have success at the 500, because we knew Graham had a car that could win the 500 last year before, lost a tire.
21.
Was that 21 2 years ago? Can they show it again at the Speedway this year, or is it back to normal for RLL? What we've seen the rest of the season outside of the GP. I think that's the big question for me with that team heading into the 500 and beyond.
I'm going to go with the cop-out answer and say that they're back to where we think they should have been.
Yeah,
I don't think
maybe.
I don't think
one race is indicative of you being able to say, of people being able to say that they're back.
Yeah,
that's my thing. Is, are they really back, or is it a mirage at a track that they're traditionally pretty strong at?
Lundgaard's been very good at this track. He obviously won the pole his first ever IndyCar race. He qualified in the Fast 6. Didn't he qualify second, I think, or something? He may have been
high up there.
Fourth, but finished, I think, like 11th or 12th in his first ever IndyCar start. So he's been quick. Graham Rahal's had success at the Indy GP. I mean, there was a guy who, he got spun out early, had the tire go down. I never really could figure out if he spun on his own or if there's contact.
Graham?
Yeah.
No, he got contact and then the flat tire from result of the contact, and had to come in, and that immediately put him back at the back of the field, and had a chance if he could get a timely caution to move back up there, but wasn't able to. But remember, Lundgaard got the pole. Was he on the pole for the GP in his first race?
No, I think he was front row.
Okay.
Because this was his first pole. But I think for Graham to bounce back like he did in that race, yes, everyone talks about, well, Graham can drive his way through the field. It's really hard when you don't have many cautions in this race. You had 3 caution laps.
Yeah.
And when you get spun out early, your whole day is saving fuel and finding a way to get the tire strategy right. Graham and his crew got the tire strategy right in this race.
And didn't really have to save fuel because they had the extra pit stop because of the tire. So they pitted 4 times, didn't really have to conserve.
But for him, one more caution, he's definitely in the conversation in this race late. And then Jack Harvey, good qualifying session, spun on his own, finished 20th. Yeah. So it was a mixed bag of results, but at least we saw pace. And the issue is we weren't even seeing pace from this team before last weekend. No,
not at all. So it was a step forward, but was it a blip on the radar, or can this be the start of something pretty solid for RLO? We'll have to see. What's your number 3?
My number 3, this is pretty simple. What we saw at Coyne, don't take out your teammate, right? And David Malukas and Stingray rule, right? Rob. This was a situation where looked like to me that Grosjean got saved by those guys having contact.
Right, because they were all going in pretty hard in that corner.
And Malukas cut across. Rob was there. I don't even know if I necessarily have blame to place on anyone. It was just a bang situation where things happened very quickly, because Malukas and Grosjean were battling, and then Grosjean, honestly, again, saved by the contact because it would have been even worse for him. They weren't giving an inch super early in the race. They get eliminated. Just a bad day. And not like this was major damage or anything, but you expect David Malukas to be strong in the oval. For Stingray Rob, this continues to be a struggle of a rookie season. And you just hope something can turn around for him to get his confidence back.
You hope, but who would you put that blame on? Was it a Stingray Rob issue, you feel like? I felt like it was. I know both were kind of cooking it hard into the corner.
Yeah, but either way, because of Malukas and Grosjean, they were going to they missed the corner, right? And then it was just wrong place, wrong time.
Right.
So I don't know, but Grosjean was lucky to just go off track and that to be the worst of it.
Right.
But his race never really got underway. He ended up finishing 11th and improved, but he didn't have it in qualifying, which I think was the bigger surprise.
Yeah, I think that was the bigger thing, was just not having it there. But, when you have reasonably young drivers in that as a team, things are going to happen, right? So luckily it wasn't catastrophic, but it was also concerning. Sometimes it just happens to be when you're in a bad position, just happens to be your teammate right next to you. And that's kind of what happened with those guys. So that was my second takeaway. It's pretty simple. Don't take out your teammate. That's rule number 1, right?
And that is obviously rule number 1 in racing. And just, I don't want to say the word disappointing for the Coyne team. So Grosjean, so I'm rewatching this. Grosjean tapped Malukas and it's very tricky. So Grosjean missed the corner, but he got saved by their contact, basically.
Right.
I don't know. Either way, it's just a mess of a situation. What's your next takeaway?
My final takeaway is good, bad in terms of the weekend of people watching in person. Mm-hmm. Tremendous crowd at the Speedway. Watching on television, not so much. And we can never have both, it seems like, with IndyCar. And on Saturday at the GP, you had boots on the ground, huge crowd in comparison to GP's. What was it, the biggest since 2015?
Yes, largest since 2015, according to IMS. We walked in, and we were on the turn 1 of the road course viewing mound. And as we walked in, we thought, wow, this is a big crowd, because by the time we walked in, it was 2:45.
Right.
That's a full hour before the green flag.
Yeah.
And we thought this was already a big crowd. And then that showed. And the improved viewing mounds definitely helped in the infield. I didn't notice anything different from turn 1 because that's where I've always been.
Yeah.
But nearly 50,000 fans, 70,000 across the 2 days. So obviously there's demand, and I think it's a good kickoff to everything in May. Now, again, there's no need for a second race,
right,
especially if NASCAR switches back to the oval for next year, which I think is a strong possibility.
Yep.
I think we'll see that race go away.
So it was great on the ground, but not so much viewing. What was it? A little over 720,000 people watching.
Yeah, that's the part where it's
not
just,
good.
It's real bad. But now I get it. Last year you had a really good race due to the rain and all of that, but it's tough for that to be the TV number. 0.46 rating. And more importantly, 715,000 viewers.
Ooh, not even 700.
Last year, it got a 0.60 and 998,000 viewers.
Yeah.
I get it. It's a Saturday. It's Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah,
and
but if you get it good last year,
didn't fall on Mother's Day weekend. Attendance was not the issue. The TV product, not great. Now, this was, according to Nathan Brown of the Indy Star, the only NBC races with a lower rating since NBC became the exclusive partner, and that's taking away races against the NFL, weather-affected races in 2020 for obvious reasons. 2019 Mid-Ohio, 670,000. That's without digital. 22 Iowa, 743,000 with digital. And we don't know the Peacock audience for this either.
Yeah.
At what point is the Peacock audience big enough that it's actually making these numbers so much worse? Like, it's a legitimate question.
Right. Well, and the thing, too, is... the Indianapolis 500 is going to, this is the reality right now. The 500 is going to have to be a strong rating from last year to set the tone to have the series have any chance of having growth in viewership this year, because I don't think there's been a single race this year that has had a higher rating than the year before. Has there been? Maybe one, but I don't remember it.
Yeah.
But so much comes down to the 500 anyway, because it skews the numbers. But you need a good 500 number, I think, to have any sort of growth, traditional growth. And they can manipulate the numbers to make it sound, but I'm talking traditional, over-the-air, regular Nielsen ratings growth this season because of such the small start. And, I know NASCAR's down and Formula One down. I don't really care what
NASCAR was down.
They're up.
Now they've been
up now?
up for, I think, upper flat for 5 straight races. So I really think the Chase Elliott effect was real.
Yeah. But I don't like comparing F1 to NASCAR to IndyCar. IndyCar is its own thing and its rating is down, pure and simple. And why? I don't know. That's a conversation for another day. Sometimes it's completely random. Sometimes there's some substance to it. But you need a good 500 rating to get back on track in the averages, because I don't see it going up much. The trend is down right now, and it's not good. And if IndyCar wants to thump its chest at the end of the year saying growth is up, it needs a good 500 number.
I will say this. I think it's easy to put too much into the TV ratings and the number of viewers each and every race weekend. I think, to me, as long as the tracks are happy with attendance, with the way IndyCar's at, because they don't have a massive TV deal, I think that's more important. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing growth at in-track attendance.
Right.
Has that hindered maybe the TV watching? Maybe a little. I think more just the streaming aspect being a factor. Yeah. It plays more of a role, to be honest. But if track attendance was bad, I'd be more concerned. It's easy to nitpick over TV ratings.
Totally, but that's what drives everything, though. I mean, you need healthy events for sure.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's first and foremost.
Yeah, that's paramount.
That's first and foremost. But at the same time, you want a 30 OEM. You want added investors, all this stuff. That's where TV number comes into play. And unfortunately, right now, IndyCar's not trending in the right direction this season. It's not too late to right the ship, but the importance of qualifying weekend ratings, and especially the 500, is going to be big.
All right.
Those are 3 things.
Yeah, those are 3 things. One other thing I didn't even get to. Kyle Kirkwood, his penalty for having to go back behind Will Power after their contact.
Which was a terrible penalty, in my opinion.
I agree. On one hand, yes, he didn't have to do a drive-through, but Power forced him off the track.
What did you want him to do? Like, Power went wide, and he couldn't even slow down and get behind Power, really, because he was in the grass. If he tried to do anything crazy, his car was going to spin out and maybe go back onto the track and take out multiple cars. So I thought that was a pretty crappy penalty. I don't think it got as much attention as it should have, but I thought it was a bogus penalty. I didn't know what you wanted Kirkwood to do in that situation.
No, I just thought if that's how you can, and look, to be fair, on one hand, we've seen this happen at other tracks, Dixon and Pato Award at Long Beach. If that's how they're going to let them race, then you just got to adjust. But I thought that was a ridiculous penalty in the situation of what happened, because I thought, what's he supposed to do?
Right. We've seen worse contact that wasn't a penalty. So why was that a penalty? That was my thing. I didn't agree with the call at all.
Yeah, I did not either. All right, so a couple other notes from this race over the weekend. First off, as far as manufacturer points, this is interesting from Trackside Online. Aaron McLaren has scored 214 points for Team Chevy in the Manufacturers Championship, 173 for Team Penske. Who would have guessed that going into the season?
McLaren needs to get some wins.
That's also very true. Meanwhile, elsewhere, as far as the race, 236 passes for position overall in this event. And it was also Scott Dixon's 350th start for Chip Ganassi Racing. Far and away, the most starts for a team. Elio is number 2 on the list with 310. With Team Penske, that's obviously not going up. AJ Foyt third with 262. Marco Andretti 250 with Andretti Autosport, so he could add to that for the 500. And Will Power at Team Penske with 226, so he will keep adding to that this season. And Elio Castroneves had a blown engine in practice. Brand new, the one he was going to use for qualifying, according to Nathan Brown. So
worse.
Just a bad weekend.
Just keeps getting worse.
Got worse for them really from the get-go, and I think it was just a tough weekend overall for that team, and it already sounds like one driver will be replaced and perhaps two.
I think both of them are going to be at least out of full-time seats next year.
Yes, I think they'll definitely have Indy 500 opportunities, but beyond that.
But I don't think the solution is just the drivers either. There's deeper problems with that team.
I think so too. So that's a look at some other notes from the GMR Grand Prix at Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. Meanwhile, shifting to the oval, we've only had one day of practice, so I feel like it's impossible to really know as far as qualifying favorites. I think the notable thing from day one, again, as we record this on Wednesday morning, so before even Thursday practice, the no-tow list is dominated by Chevy, and in particular, Carpenter and Penske. But the top speeds dominated by Ganassi with 4 of the top 7. So you had Rinus VeeKay go 223.2 no-tow on Tuesday. That was the top no-tow speed, and even more notable on the no-tow chart as far as Rinus VeeKay, almost 2 miles per hour quicker than last year's leading no-tow lap. It was also set by VeeKay as far as that time from Trackside Online on that. So that's something to keep in mind.
I'm not really looking at no-tow until tomorrow, because yesterday and today, talking Wednesday and Thursday, they're running in race trim. I mean, they're working on race setups, and tow speeds is what matters. I mean, you're always getting tows in the race. So I'm not really I don't really pay attention to no-tows until tomorrow when it goes up, until Friday when it goes up and you're starting to lock into qualifying. And we were trading texts about this earlier this week with Tuesday effectively getting rained out, and you're limited now to just very much 2 days of long-term running for the race.
Yeah, you have carb day.
But that's like an hour.
Check.
That's
then you have the Tuesday practice that they've added.
Is that an all-day thing?
No. I don't believe so. So I think yes. Why not start on Monday? I understand not starting on Sunday because it's Mother's Day. You're not going to draw a crowd.
Well, I'm not worried about Mother's Day. I'm worried about you need a day for teams to reconfigure their cars. The smaller teams that their road course cars are also their oval cars, and changing things over. I get it. Not doing Sunday. I couldn't care less about Mother's Day. Maybe that's a thing because I've been in careers where I work holidays. I've worked weekends. And that doesn't bother me. Mother's Day, Father's Day, Labor Day, Memorial. I don't care. Like, this is racing, and the Speedway's open barely 50 days a year across the entire year with stuff going on. Like, who cares about Mother's Day? In my opinion, all the people with mothers are gasping at me. But if I told my mom, I'm sorry, I can't do anything for Mother's Day, I'm working, then okay, it's not a big deal. So you use Sunday to reconfigure the cars, which the teams are doing anyway.
Correct.
And then you start practice on Monday, because when you have a rain out on Tuesday or any of the days, all of a sudden you're just down to 2 days. And this whole month of May, quote unquote, thing effectively falls into you have 2 days to prep for the race in terms of long-term running, in terms of we're going to do an extended stint of 30 laps and see how that goes, and come in and make a change and go out for another 30 laps and do that. And we have all day to do that. You're down to 2 days to effectively do that. That's not enough time, in my opinion, particularly with how they prop this event up and all the practice time. You hear about all the practice time you have. You lose 1 day, you're down to 2 days. If you lost 1 day, let's say, or 2 days, if it rained Tuesday and Wednesday, you're down to 1 day to figure out things. It's just not enough time.
No, and the other thing is, so that it's actually a Monday practice on May 22nd, but that's just from 1 to 3. So
yeah, that's not enough time.
It's not, and that's, you're already in the race. Now, for teams behind the 8 ball, whether you're Indy 500 one-off or you're struggling for speed.
Like R.C. Anderson, he had to use Wednesday morning to pass his rookie orientation.
Now, thankfully for him and the team, it was not really an issue. They got through all but like one lap that was needed to pass, and then he ran a practice lap, when it was open for everyone during the noon to 6 period. It was fine, and it's not been an issue. But for people struggling for speed, like Callum Ilott on day one struggled, that's a serious issue, and you need all the time you can get when you look at how things play out. If you're struggling, if you're behind the 8 ball, that's a real problem. And for him to be a half a mile an hour, it doesn't sound like much, but to be that far behind R.C. Anderson after day one of practice, that's a problem, right?
It's a problem. I mean, he couldn't run regularly in traffic until yesterday afternoon.
Yeah,
till Wednesday afternoon. He took most of the early afternoon off.
He couldn't even crack 220 most of the day.
Like, now all of a sudden he's up against it. It's Thursday, and R.C. Anderson's team is up against it because... And it's on them of missing the open test for sure. There's no practice on Monday for some stupid reason. They're rained out on Tuesday. Wednesday morning has to be his rookie orientation. They're focused solely on that. They cannot start even thinking about the race itself until yesterday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. This is I don't understand why they don't practice on Monday. Don't give me the it's Mother's Day and people need to be off. Like, no, that's bogus. It's bogus.
Sunday was Mother's Day. Monday,
that's what I'm saying.
Monday, there's no impact.
But they build in Sunday as like track officials and everything off Sunday, and then they can start working on stuff Monday or whatever. I don't know how it works, but Sunday's fine. No track activity Sunday. You start track activity on Monday. It used to be like that. I don't understand why it's not a full week of practice for teams. And you know what? If you open up Monday and there are very few teams that go out, so what? Like, at least they have the option. And I don't think they should worry about, I know maybe this is what it's worried about, is people not going on Monday.
I'm guessing that's the reason.
The teams need it. Not even if the fans aren't there, the teams need it. You're telling me there's an appreciable jump from Monday to Tuesday?
Also, you throw in the fact that there's no guarantee you're going to get, 4 full practice days.
I think rarely you get
the weather in May is very hit or miss, right?
Well, it's hit or miss in Indiana.
Period.
365, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, there's no guarantee you're going to get 4 full days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And Friday is different because you're working on qualifying. You have the boost added up. So we're going to see fast laps Friday as long as the weather holds. But there are no guarantees with that. So why not start on Monday?
Yeah, I don't understand.
If you're doing it to give everyone Sunday off, I don't know. Like, here's the thing: your Indy 500 cars,
teams are working on
ready.
Sunday. Teams are working on Sunday,
correct?
Even though they get Monday off.
Impound.
Yes, I think it's an Indianapolis Motor Speedway thing. I think they probably operate at a loss on Monday with practice because there's not a lot of people going compared to workers. I get that. They probably want to ease into the week because the next 2 weeks is gangbusters, right? And they want to take their time to reconfigure everything from Saturday and all that stuff. Oh, they don't want to have too many people work on Sunday in terms of track workers. No, it's May at Indianapolis. You're working. The race ends on Saturday. Sunday, you use it to get everything ready for the week of practice. The teams are working. You can work. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, the week of Indianapolis 500 practice starts. Boom. If you're on track, cool. If you're not on track, cool. But you have the opportunity. Because Mark, you could look at R.C. Enerson. He could have got all that stuff done on Monday, and then Tuesday rained out, and he hits the ground running on Wednesday morning. But instead, he's still messing around yesterday afternoon trying to pass phase 3 of the rookie test and rookie orientation. And it just puts everybody behind the eight ball. I mean, God forbid if it rained Thursday and you take that out and you only have one day, man. I mean, one of these years, we're going to have a really wet week of Indy 500 practice where there's going to be hardly any practicing going on. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand why you don't run on Mondays. At least have the option to run Mondays.
Well, and the thing is that you're not starting May 1st anymore like they used to, or even earlier, having 4 days of qualifying. You're doing 2 days of qualifying.
Yeah.
So you've kind of condensed the schedule as it is. Why not take advantage of the time that's available?
And that's my thing is people talk about so much practice time for Indy. Not really. No. You have 3 days during the week. And if you lose one of those days, like we did this year, you're down to 2 days of regular running before you get the boost on Friday and all eyes are on qualifying, right? 2 days is not a lot of time. And I just don't understand why it's not a full week.
So looking at the times, and look, there's... you can't read too much into this because we don't know who's doing, qual sims, who's on fresh tires, all of that, right? But it's clear that Ganassi is fast. It's clear that you look at the teams that are struggling. Callum Ilot's struggling. R.C. Enerson, I wouldn't say struggling's the word, but it will be tough. Do I think Able Motorsports and R.C. Enerson can make the race? Yes, I do. But I think there will be other people. Christian Lundgaard, once again, struggling on the oval. Are the Rahal struggles? Is it a Rahal team struggle or is it just Lundgaard struggling?
Yeah.
And Catherine Legg, first IndyCar race in what, like 10 years? With Rahal, she was 31st on the speed chart. Romain Grosjean, 30th. Devlin DiFrancesco, 29th. Ed Carpenter, 28th, but he's one of the top guys on the Noto. So it's a whole varying thing. You can't read too much into everything, but for people like Enerson and Ilott and even Lundgaard and Legg, I'd say, yes, there's legitimate concern.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Even I think some other guys that are in there that weren't as quick because you don't have a lot of time to figure it out. And that's the big thing too with lack of time is we talk about weekends, regular race weekends. If you roll off the truck behind, it's going to be tough to make that up. You're reaching a point with the lack of Indy 500 practice that if you roll off the truck, quote unquote, roll off the truck behind at Indy, there's not a lot of time to get it right. And it could either mean competitive cars or it could mean making the race, depending on which team you're with.
So that's kind of the first thing. The other thing to take away, first car on track has never won the race.
Who was it?
Scott McLaughlin.
Oh, he's toast.
Yeah. So Penske's always, first out. We've seen him finish second. Drivers finish second, but that from Chad 200. You go back, and last year the first car on track was also Scott McLaughlin. In 2021 is Takuma Sato. He finished 14th. The best finishes, now several have started on the pole. Ryan Briscoe in 2012, Elio in 2010. But the best finishes, Marco Andretti in 2006 when he was second, and Elio Castroneves in 2014 when he was second. Joseph Newgarden, the last driver to even finish in the top 10, who was first on track. That was back in 2019 when he was in fourth.
Yes. We'll see what happens, but I wonder if it's like a who's going to blink first type go out. I know Penske doesn't buy into any superstitions or anything, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to be the first one out.
No. And the other note, as far as the speeds, so Sato was fastest last year. As far as the fastest practice lap before Fast Friday, 2:28.939 last year. This year, day one, already up there on the speed chart at 2:29.439. So,
monster toes.
Do we see the pole sitter? As far as qualifying goes, do we need an average above 2:33?
No, I don't think so. What was the pole speed last year?
So last year, Scott Dixon, his 4-lap average, let's see, was 2:34.046. So I think we'll see above 2:33.
Yeah, I would say over 2:33. I don't think we get
as far as the average.
Yes.
Now, that was the fastest pole in 500 history.
Yeah.
Do we touch Ari Leindyk's nearly 2:37 in 96?
I don't think so. Because then you have to run a couple laps at about 2:39.
Yeah.
Your first couple laps before you start bleeding off. Then the latter couple laps of that. So I just don't think so. And track conditions are everything too. But I don't see an appreciable jump from last year. I would be surprised. I think the pole speed is less than what we saw last year. I think it's a 2:33.
I think it's up because the temperatures look better as far as where we're at. We're talking 70s, not 80s.
Yeah.
And if there's any bit of cloud cover, which there was some last year, I don't know if we'll get that as much though this year. So yeah, we'll see. Let's make some terrible predictions.
Oh, we got to be better than our double Grosjean pick last week.
Who misses the race?
It's a good question. At this point, I'm saying Enerson. And I will directly tie it to the lack of track time. Now, that team, it's on them for missing the open test, because I think that was huge particularly for that team, but I just think they're playing from behind the 8 ball too much. There's too much experience elsewhere in the paddock. They need to find it. They need to find it fast. They don't have a technical alliance with anybody. They're trying to figure it out. I just think there's too many things stacked against them that they're continue for me to be the easy pick to miss the race.
I think it will also be a rookie. I don't think Enerson. I'm going to go with Benjamin Peterson.
Really?
I think someone's going to crash in qualifying, and that will...
Yeah. I could definitely see that.
I'm not concerned about RC Enerson crashing unless the car is just completely unsafe. And I didn't get those vibes yesterday on Wednesday as we record this Thursday morning. I didn't get those vibes as far as the team and the car, the confidence level. I just think we'll see one of the rookies miss it, whether it's Benjamin Peterson, Augustine Canapino, Stingray Robb, or RC Enerson, who at least has attempted to qualify. So I'm going to go with Benjamin Peterson, to miss the race.
It's amazing we're not talking about Canapino despite his limited experience on an oval. Now, when you're talking crashing and qualifying, I guess one of the built-in safeguards against that in the current system is if you crash Saturday, you can come back and race for the final spots on Sunday. Are you talking about maybe just pushing it too much on Sunday after finishing in the bottom 3 on Saturday, or do you see a crash and then just not being able to find that speed after a rebuilt car on Sunday?
The latter. I mean, we saw that a couple years ago with Alonso, right?
Yeah.
Where they couldn't find the speed.
After having issues.
So I just think someone will crash on Saturday and then they'll just be behind the 8 ball. Now, as far as pole sitter and average speed.
Okay, the pole sitter and the average speed, I'm going to go 2:33.8. Do you need another number?
No.
How far? How many decimal points?
I'm waiting on your pick for the.
I will go 2:33.8 for. Is it too easy? I'm going to take Pato Award.
Okay.
I was about to say Alex Palou, but I'm going to say it's too easy right now.
I'm going to take the easy choice and go with Scott Dixon.
Again?
For the poll, 234.3.
Okay, there you go. Don't bet those picks.
Yes, I'm sure they are absolutely going to be wrong.
No.
So that's our picks as far as missing the race and winning the pole. It's way too early for me to even dive into the who's going to be in the Fast 12 conversation, who's going to be 30 through 34.
I really need to see runs on Friday before I really start going, okay, this Ganassi was impressive. Ganassi's going to have race pace. That's obvious. But will they have qualifying pace? They have in previous years, but will they have it this year? I just have to wait till Friday to see. But I think Saturday could be very fascinating, Caleb, because with the potential of rain in Speedway on Friday, it looks like afternoon, evening type. How much rain? Does it wipe the track clear of the majority of the rubber? They get some running time on Saturday morning, but could we have a largely green track when we start qualifying? I think that could really change things up as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to watch as far as the weather goes, because I think the speeds will be quick, especially Saturday, because we're talking about temps in the low 70s.
Yeah,
now it is going to be sunny.
Yeah.
So you're not getting an advantage of cloud cover like they got last year, despite it being warmer.
And it's supposed to be a slow warm up on Saturday, which people are like, well, what's that matter? Well, the problem with qualifying 34 cars is a lot can change when you go from 1 to 34, right? And so if we can have temps around the same temperature throughout most of that time, it's going to be good. And right now, the high may not even hit 70 in Speedway on Saturday, which is perfect, because if you're running at, say, the first spot at 61 degrees and then 34th goes and it's 66 degrees, there's not a lot of change. I mean, there's change for sure, but we're not talking starting at 62 degrees and by the time 34 goes, it's 81 degrees. You know what I mean? So I think this will then maybe limit the impact on where you're at in the qualifying order as opposed to other years, but a rogue cloud or sunshine can also play a big difference as well.
If you agree or disagree with our picks, let us know. You can always reach us, newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. You'll get emails for episodes and any special announcements that we have to make. You can also check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers for sale for you there. And you can follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast, the handle on Instagram and Twitter. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. And you can be a supporter via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier, Rob, Stitch, and others for their support. Again, starting at just as little as $1 per month. And as always, you can listen for free on your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Overcast, Castbox, wherever you listen to podcasts for free. Mailbag time and plenty to dive into this week, of course, because, well, we had a race last week. So we'll start with rate the race in the Indy GP. What rating would you give it?
I gave it a 6.
I would give it a 6 as well.
It was all right. The primary versus alternate conversation early on was intriguing. Once that got figured out, though, there wasn't much, and Alex Palou ran away. One caution didn't help. I gave it a 6.
Mom 2X over 2002. This from Courtney, gave it a 1. For all the commercials, no side-by-side on Peacock. 4 or 5 for the race. Kind of boring, but happy for Arrow McLaren. Here's the thing. I get people complaining on Peacock. Just buy an antenna. It's like $20. Watch on NBC. I'm telling you. If you're annoyed by the no side-by-side, that's how you take care of it.
Here's my thing with side-by-side. And I guess a lot of people watch live, and I usually don't. Like, I fast forward even with its side-by-side.
Yeah.
If it comes back and something happened, then I'll rewind. But if something happens during the break, whether it's side-by-side or not, NBC will show it.
Correct.
Again, right? So, I don't know. I know some people are locked into side-by-side, and it's needed. The 500 is nice when that's up for sure, but I don't necessarily need it. But I understand why people are upset about it. But again, just get an antenna, people.
Tudor Indy gave it a 7.5, much better than most of the GPs at IMS. Chaos at the beginning and intriguing strategy to follow throughout. Daniel SEM 2004 gave it a 6, nothing special, just a typical Indy GP, almost like an F1 race. Left_Brigade gave it a 7. Question marks around tires kept the excitement high on the track. Lots of good hard braking passes on the front straight, with mistakes taking the battle over the next few turns. Good start to the month of May.
I don't think we can compare it to an F1 race because what was it? The last F1 race, where was that at? Miami had 60 passes for position.
Yeah. This had 236.
And this had 236. So there's a ways to go until we're comparing Formula One and IndyCar in terms of that respect.
Playing spades, 1 out of 10 out of principle. The Indy GP is mid. Racing-wise, 5 out of 10. That from Playing Spades. Big D Kart gave it a 6. Watch it from the new Turn 1 viewing mound. That was fun. Yeah, that's a good place. That's where I watched that race. Hunter's Way 67 gave it a 7. Thought it was good. Plo ran away with it at the end, but as per IndyCar, plenty of action behind him. RLL screwed Lundgaard by not bringing him in 2 laps earlier. You got to get everything right? And
that's the thing. Teams are incapable of doing that, and that's why only 2 teams win championships, and that's why right now only 4 teams win races. And I mentioned this to you: 32 races since a team or a driver not with one of the quote-unquote Power 4 have won a race. Not since Elio winning the 500.
Which is crazy, but it makes sense.
And people are going to say, well, it's 14 to 27 cars. I get that. But at the same time, you can't continue to tell me how competitive and unpredictable this series is and anybody can win a race when that's not true. There's 4 teams that can win races right now. And that is facts based on almost 2 entire seasons, Caleb. 32 races now.
Yeah. I mean, if you go through the Indy 500, that is 2 full seasons.
Yes. 2 full seasons without a winner outside of the top 4 teams.
Jamin T14, 7 enjoyable event. Daguerre gave it a 6. Pretty good for an Indy GP, but lacked memorable moments. Rain or a caution at the end would have been a different story. Yeah. Well, yes, that's the GP in a nutshell.
I was hoping you would bring out the garden hose in turn 1 and start spraying down the track to bring something out.
Would have helped. Poet Shevchenko, the drivers kept it mostly clean, like there wasn't really a clearly preferred tire strategy. Plo showed why he's Ganassi material. McLaren got everything but a win. I'd have liked some rain, though, 7 out of 10. Jeff Zerneski, 7.5. Differing strategies helped keep it interesting. Plo ran away at the end. Good to see a non-Penske car win this race. Yeah, Penske's dominated this event.
They have.
Up until... last year?
Here's a question for you. And I know we're coming off a GP last year that we had, 8 or 9 cautions, but it was kind of in the wet.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a more measured approach by teams and drivers to the GP as opposed to any other race during the season because it's only a few days from the start of the 500 practice? And they're like, I know most of them have different cars, but they're like, I just want to get through this race. I don't want to have a wrecked race car, taking it back to the shop. We got to deal with that and adjusting everything, getting ready. Do you feel like drivers maybe are a little bit more measured in what they do in the GP because of that? Or is that impossible to take out of race car drivers?
I don't think so, because race car drivers are going to go for it. Maybe the teams wanted to be more cautious, but here's the thing. It's a road course with plenty of runoff. So unless you screw up, coming through turn 1 of the oval on the final turn,
and get into the wall there.
It's going to be pretty hard
That's true.
to get a lot of damage to your car.
That is true. It's a good point.
Elsewhere, Jeremy from HBG gave it a 7. That RLL decision on the Scuff Reds was about a -5. Firehawk 89 gave it an 8. Run_Mark_Run gave it a 7. Unrelated, ready for a track tenderloin on Carb Day. Yeah, we will be out there. So we'll get to that in a bit. Aaron J. Richmond, anytime Penske or Dixon doesn't win, it's an automatic 6 for me. And it was a 5th winner in 5 races. I get to a 7. DC Soda gave it a 7, I think. Needing a spot of rain, but still fun. Just begging Ganassi to get a driver that doesn't bore me to tears an hour a day closer to practice, which is a 10. T. Jarrett 312 gave it a 1. And finally, Beyond the Flag 16.8006. They're clearly trolling us. So
they are, but I'm sure there
it.
was a appreciable metric of some sort that Beyond the Flag used to get that number.
Oh, I'm sure very scientific data.
I'm sure they could break it
formula.
down for us.
Exactly.
Break down the algorithm.
So that is Rate the Race. Thanks to A. Saters, ASATERS on Twitter. He has a printable scanner frequency list for Indy 500 practice and qualifying. So check out his Twitter for that. It's very helpful if you're going to the track. We debated, as far as should Indy 500 practice begin on Monday. You posted a poll. Nearly 88% of you said yes. 12% said no. As far as a couple replies here, Curtis Boggs said, I voted yes because May 1st was a Monday this year.
Yeah.
Valid point. DC Soda, yes, they should give as much time as possible to get practice in, even if it's 5 days to get 4 days of practice, fine. We can't have these one-off teams and then limit their track time even more. Exactly.
I totally agree. Yes.
I fully agree with all of that. Let's see. Elsewhere, Pilot Shevchenko on the TV rating with the numbers. Where are the fans going? I noticed fewer views on both IndyCar's YouTube channel and fan channels too. I don't know.
It's a great question. If we could answer that question, we'd probably be paid at least somewhat by IndyCar.
Yes. So I have no idea. Now, your whole thing that upset some people on
me upsetting
5 races,
people?
5 winners, but Ganassi, Penske, Andretti, Penske, Ganassi as far as the race winners this year. 10 straight races won by the Big 3, 32 straight by the Big 4. And a few replies on this. Hickey 93, the Big 4 encompasses 14 of the 27 full-time entries, though. I get that, but
it's still half of your field can't win a race.
Yes. 500 Indy 1911. Based on the pattern, here's the rest of the winners this season.
This was great.
The 500 will be Ganassi, Detroit, Penske, Road America, Andretti, Mid-Ohio, Penske, Toronto, Ganassi, Iowa, Ganassi, Iowa, Penske, Nashville, Andretti, Indy, Penske, Gateway, Ganassi, Portland, Ganassi, Laguna, Penske. We'll see how that
done.
plays
Don't
out.
even have to watch the rest of the season.
Yeah,
but
why even bother? Like, we already know the results.
The point stands is there is a lot of competitiveness between the top 4 teams in the series. There's not a lot of competitiveness throughout the entire series in terms of winning races. And another point of that is how excited we got for Rahal, Letterman, Landon. Could they actually have figured it out? Could this actually be a team that can win a race? No, they screwed it up on Saturday. So 32 races, folks, almost 2 full years since a team not with the Big 4, or excuse me, a driver not with the Big 4 has won a race. That's a long time. And yet we are still hammered over that about how competitive this series is and anybody can do anything on any given weekend. That's not true. And we talked about why. And a big reason is the lack of innovation in the sense of a new engine formula or a chassis. Is the longer the chassis has been around, and what is it, 12 years?
Yeah.
12 years is the power teams have figured out every little thing they possibly can with this. And eventually, the longer you have a product go, the more the big teams are going to be able to figure out every secret. If you bring a new chassis on board, hopefully the hybrid technology brings this, is you reset everything to 0. And sometimes the small teams can hit on something that the big teams haven't yet, and they have a momentary advantage, and they can use that, right? But eventually things even out, or eventually the teams with more money get ahead. But then how you combat that is then you change things, and everything goes back to 0 again. We haven't changed things at the chassis in 12 years.
Well,
I mean, little, the universal aero kits, the aero
I would
screen.
say between the aero kits in 2015, 16, 17, and then they added like a piece, I think, in 2019, like the advanced frontal protection, right?
Which was just a
little blip,
blip.
something. And then in 2020, obviously the aero screen. Really, since the aero screen, that's the last major change. That did impact things quite a bit for some drivers.
Yeah,
but now they've had enough time to adjust.
It's a good point. I just don't think there's enough changes going on. Here's my theory, and I told you this, is I'm not saying that Roger Penske is not making changes purely to keep Penske's competitive advantage. But I will say, if Roger Penske was Mike Shank, let's say Mike Shank was owner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indianapolis 500 or the IndyCar Series, he would probably be pushing for a new car. Why? Because Michael Shank Racing right now can't compete. And if you have a new chassis, everything resets. You can try to find some advantages, but Roger Penske's not pushing for a new car. And I have to think consciously or subconsciously, part of that is, well, we're not having problems competing.
Yeah, why would you?
So what do I care? And that's not the right approach. But I'm not saying that Roger Penske's purposely doing that. I'm saying subconsciously, why would he push for that?
Yeah, and same with Ganassi, same with Andretti, same with all that. One other thing to get to as far as someone else with a response as far as the practice days, Tyler_Allen, GP should be moved up to just after Barber. And the 2 April test days should be moved into May and kick off Thursday the week prior to pole day, the full week leading up to pole day. But in this day, I don't know what teams really required compared to the past. Well, back in the day, you required more time because you had new chassis every year. You had different regulations every year. Yeah. With everything the same, it does require less time. but it's not like they're just sitting here twiddling their thumbs. It's valuable track time.
I mean, a lot in the past, you were bringing a car that in some instances you hadn't even run yet anywhere.
Yeah.
And you didn't know if the first time you put it out there would be a massive oil leak and have to bring it back in and all that stuff. So when you were bringing new engines and new chassis and new designs every year, you were really starting from zero. Like we said, when you're trying to reset the field for the season, you're starting at zero and you have a lot to figure out. That's why, hence you needed more practice time. I'm not saying we need to go back to 2+ full weeks of practice, but at the same time, it can't be 3 days either. And then if you factor in some rain, and I'm talking 3 days of regular running, I'm not counting Fast Friday because Fast Friday is different. You're cutting it to 3 days. And if you have weather, it could be 2 days down to 1 day. And for some of these teams, and for all these teams, it's not fair, but particularly the smaller teams.
No, that wraps up the mailbag for this week. Time for news and notes. And first up, this came down as we record on Thursday morning. Stephanie Beatrice will be the honorary Grand Marshal for the Indy 500. And you may say, who? Well, I recognize her face. She's in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the TV show. Also starring in Twisted Metal, which is on Peacock, coming out July 27th.
Did you ever play that game, Twisted Metal?
No, I did not.
Oh, it was great.
That premieres again July 27th on Peacock. So that is your Grand Marshal. Let's see what else. A lot of great articles by Nathan Brown of the Indy Star this week. Had one on the relationship between Tony Kanaan and Elio Castroneves, Graham Rahal on his future. Basically, to sum it up, the sponsors in the contract are tied to Graham's name. So, what does he do? He still wants to keep racing. He's not up to retire. Yes, as he gets older, he's dealing with some pain. But will he leave Rahal? I'd be shocked.
Me too. And I think a big part of that is those business deals that he's cultivated that are his, but they're the teams as well. And a lot of those, I'm sure, would be contingent on wherever he goes, they would want to go.
Correct.
Because of the relationship he's built. I just don't know if he wants to undermine his father and the team. And it's almost a tough position because he's either going to be selfless or selfish. If he's selfish, and I wouldn't blame him for doing this, he would want to go to a different team to try to change his luck. If he's selfless, and I wouldn't blame him for doing this, he feels like I have an obligation to this team that my name is on, my last name is on, and I'm probably going to be a Michael Andretti type once I retire from racing and running this team and growing it. So that's the decision he has to make. And does doing one compromise the other? If he breaks off and does his own thing, does that hurt the legacy and then what he takes over eventually? If he stays, obviously that could hurt him in potentially being able to win more races before he retires. So he has a massive decision to make. I don't think either of them are wrong, but neither one of them are 100% right either.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee either way in this situation.
Totally.
The one notable thing also to throw out there of the story, it's quite simply, Graham said he hasn't had talks with his dad about contract stuff. He runs that through Mike Lanigan. And so that's something to keep in mind as far as, look, this contract was like a long-term, it's like a 5 or 6 year deal. And I remember in his announcement, it was a very long-term deal. So it's hard to believe we're already coming to the end of that. Meanwhile, Marcus Ericsson, who said not bad for a pay driver after last year's Indy 500, telling Nathan Brown of the Indy Star, he doesn't want his next contract, whether it's with Chip or someone else, he doesn't want to be a pay driver. Yes, so he's still bringing money, but he wants to be hired on merit, and we'll see how that plays out for him. I think he's earned that right, obviously, but we'll see how that plays out.
It'll be a fascinating thing to watch because effectively Chip Ganassi let Alex Palou go, didn't want to pay him as much as he wanted.
Yep.
Okay. Now he's in a position where Marcus Ericsson wants paid. He doesn't want to be bringing money. Is Chip Ganassi in a position to pay Marcus Ericsson? It hasn't hurt Chip Ganassi yet because he still has Scott Dixon and he won a 500 last year with Ericsson. He's won a championship with Palou. But at some point, he has to start spending money, right? Like, McLaren's coming in and spending money. Somebody's going to spend money on Marcus Ericsson if he goes somewhere else. Like, at some point, Chip Ganassi needs to open the pocketbooks and be like, man, if I'm going to still compete especially once Scott Dixon is gone. I'm going to have to pay some of these guys.
The good news is Husky chocolate is available for purchase in the U.S. thanks to the Marcus Ericsson kit. It's $49. You get a 12-pack of Husky chocolate RTD, which I assume means ready to drink, a first cap. It's got the Marcus Ericsson logo and the 500 winner and the 8 on it. You get a baseball card from Chip Ganassi. They have their baseball card collection and a lanyard as well. So that's step 1. Step 2 was Husky chocolate. Remember, he's sponsored by Husky Ice Spritz this year. And so that will be available in the U.S. And that is a different thing. So Adam Stern reporting it will be available in 15 states by September, largely in the Midwest and other states that IndyCar will race in, like California. So you'll be able to buy that, the alcoholic beverage, coming up in the fall. So you'll at least have some access. And for Marcus Ericsson, also on the line, $420,000 bonus if he can go back to back, because Borg Warner does that rollover jackpot.
Yep.
So a lot going on with Marcus Ericsson.
A lot to follow. He's getting plenty of calls. Does he move?
We shall see. Meanwhile, Robert Wickens says he wants to be the first disabled Indy 500 racer next year. We've heard about this. We'll see how the tech moves forward and if this is a possibility. And is that seat still waiting for him at McLaren, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Now that they're going to be at 5 next year, I mean,
would they go to 5? They'll be at 4, but will they go to 5?
Well, that's contingent on would they add a full-timer next year. If they do that, and then they have Kyle Larson, that's 5. Would they run then Robert Wickens in a 6th? They wouldn't do that, right?
Or would he be, because he's competing with Brian Herta Autosport in the IMSA series?
Yeah.
Would he, the IMSA Challenge series, would he just go with that team as part of the Andretti umbrella?
Potentially, yeah. Regardless, I can't wait to see it. He's going to do it at some point.
I hope so. Full article on autosport.com as far as the possibilities. They believe it's possible. They have some time to figure it out from a technical standpoint. Brian Herta is saying, but he's behind the plan to get him to return. Just comes down to what they figure out as far as in IndyCar. They can get him in and out of with the aero screen, right? So they figure that aspect out. It's just there's a lot at play, and from a safety standpoint and a technical standpoint, to make it happen.
I agree. I think it's only a matter of time, but hopefully sooner rather than later.
Speaking of Andretti, Wayne Taylor Racing and Andretti Autosport announced a 2-car GTP program in IMSA starting in 2024. So remember, Andretti Autosport with a stake in Wayne Taylor Racing, so that'll be another thing to watch on the sports car side, and could see, an extra entry for IndyCar because of sports car guys coming over to crew an Indy 500 only entry. So that's something to keep in mind. I forgot to mention this: Marcus Ericsson, Unleashing the Dragon, the documentary.
You said it was very good.
Very good. So it's on the Motorsports on NBC YouTube. You can check it out. Just search for Unleashing the Dragon. Very well done. It's James Hinchcliffe basically sitting down with Marcus Ericsson in a movie theater as Marcus rewatches last year's Indy 500 for the first time. It's really well done. So highly recommend that. Let's see, what else do we have? Lewis Hamilton, as far as testing in IndyCar. It's got to be an old school IndyCar, so we can throw out all the hype over that. So Penske PC23, right? I think that's got to be
get him in there. It's more powerful than what they got now.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see, a couple other thoughts I forgot to get to on the mailbag. DC Soda on the number of teams as far as the balance. This attempted gotcha you guys keep trying to make stick is more tiring. 4 teams over half the field having a shot. Everyone is absolutely competitive, and it's funny to suggest otherwise. Plus, everyone knows this is directed at F1.
No, it's not.
That's not what this is directed at all.
No, not at all. I don't know how you can argue it is competitive when half the field can't win a race for the last 2 years.
Yeah, F1 we know is one team.
Yes, it's one team out of 10.
For IndyCar, the fact that we haven't had it outside of the Big 3, now Big 4, win a race going back to the 2021 Indy 500. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is not a shot at F1.
That's it's a problem because the longer it goes, the more it becomes the narrative. And maybe not outwardly, but within the paddock and getting new entries. And eventually we're going to have some subtraction in this paddock. It's not going to keep growing. I highly question if AJ Foyt Racing is around much past AJ's passing, if that ever happens, because they're not good.
I mean, they're funded by Benjamin Peterson and the money he's bringing to the table, and then the other entry they piece together. It's
basically a shoestring operation, and they're not getting any better. And I remember when Larry Foyt was brought in, he was going to be the person to turn it around, and then they got ABC Supply and all this. Then they were going to get this. It's
then they got Rocket.
Then they got Rocket, and it's never happened. And I think hopefully AJ's around another 10 years. I just don't think that team can last another 10 years. So eventually you're going to have some contraction, but you're going to speed up that contraction if teams can't compete for winning races. If in 4 years from now we're having the same conversations about Meyer Shank, and I know Mike Shank loves the Indy 500 and IndyCar, but what's keeping Mike Shank around in IndyCar if he goes 6 years without winning a race? That's all I'm saying.
Makes it very, very hard. Absolutely. A couple other notes to get to. The IndyCar hybrid system, this from motorsport.com, could be most effective on ovals. Go figure. Because falling from behind, you can save energy as far as drafting. So we'll see how that plays out. Honda and Chevy working together to figure out this new hybrid unit that will be in place next year. Meanwhile, Kyle Busch says he's no longer making calls to teams trying to land an Indianapolis 500 ride in future years. I don't know if it will ever happen. That's what he told Bob Pockrass.
I believe it happens, but maybe not as soon as people would like. But all eyes are on Kyle Larson right now for running next year's 500.
And then a final note, David Malsher Lopez leaving motorsport. So a longtime rider there. He will be, and also did stuff for Autosport and Autosport Magazine. But for him, he is returning back to Racer. He'll become editor of Vintage Motorsport Magazine, which is under the Racer umbrella. So congrats to him on the new gig.
Maybe he can chip into some IndyCar stuff here or there.
Yeah. And, he's got plenty to write about since the chassis are vintage, right?
Yeah, it's true. You could just cover the series.
Yeah. Vintage racing series. Sorry, I couldn't help but make that joke. All right, time for our random split error driver of the week.
All right, we're going to the IRL right now for our random split error driver of the week, and we're going to go to, 2002 and go with Hideki Noda.
A guy I've actually heard of.
Yes. 2 different teams. In 2002, he started the season with Convergent Racing.
Never heard of them.
Me neither. They don't even have a Wikipedia page. And then took the middle of the season off and then appeared in 3 races with Indy Regency Racing.
I've actually heard of that team.
Yeah, towards the end of the season, his best finish was 10th at Phoenix with Convergent Racing. His best finish with Indy Regency Racing was at Gateway, was 17th. But that was it. He actually raced 2 years in Indy Lights with Indy Regency Racing, actually won a race at Portland in 1997. People know him worldwide as being in 3 F1 Grand Prix, or is it Grands Prix? That's right. I always got to get that right.
Grands Prix.
Grands Prix. Debuting in the 1994 European Grand Prix. Did not score any championship points. He replaced Yannick Dalmas in the LaRousse car.
Don't remember that.
Me neither. Failed to finish in any of the 3 racers. He hoped to join Simtech in 1995, but the folding of the Simtech team ended that idea. After that, he did some racing, some Grand Prix racing in Japan, and did some Formula 3000s, both in Japan and elsewhere. Some Super GT stuff in Japan as well. Did some Le Mans races in the late 2000s. But only that one season, 6 races in IndyCar, or the Indy Racing League, Convergent Racing, 3 races, Indy Regency Racing, 3 races, and was done after that. Still with us, 54 years old, native of Osaka, Japan, Mr. Hideki Noda, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right, that wraps up this week's episode recap of the GMR Grand Prix at IMS. If you miss it, we have a special interview with Callum Ilott that we did earlier this week. And next week, be sure to be looking for another special driver interview episode to drop as well as we build up. And don't forget, I tease this, we're doing a live show on Carb Day. So Carb Day IMS, 3 to 4 p.m. We'll do a live show. You can listen live, 1380thefan.com, 1380thefan app, or your smart speaker live, or if you're in the Fort Wayne area, obviously just listen on your radio. And then we'll be out and about walking around, so come say hi to us on Carb Day as well, and may even see if we can do kind of a meetup. It's pretty tough just because there are a million people there, and it's hard to find a good thing, but able to meet a couple people last year. We'll see if we can figure something out. But again, 3 to 4 p.m., 1380thefan.com, live shows. We recap Carb Day practice and preview the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.